Welcome back to Behind the Play. My name is Alex Adams, and today I'm joined by one of the best in the business, William Liu of Sportsnet and the Raptors Show. William, thanks so much for taking the time and doing this. I know how busy you are and how precious your time is, like precious to chew it. Sorry, it was just right there. But thanks so much for coming on. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks for the kind words, and yeah, happy to come on again.
Yeah, I just want to ask a little bit about your career, and I know you came to Canada, at a young age and kind of fell in love with the game. Just talk a little bit about how you became a Raptors fan and got into the game of basketball.
Yeah, like it wasn't. I think a lot of people get into sports because like their parents introduce them to things, as most things happen like that. But um, you know that wasn't really an entry point for me. My dad certainly loved soccer, and that's why my favorite sport is soccer as well. And I've played with them pretty much since I was 2 years old. But yeah, in terms of basketball, like that didn't really happen until I went to school and, got to, just try to fit in. You try to fit in and see what everyone else likes, right? And I remember this very distinct moment on the playground, where this kid came up to me. He's like, "You got to choose. Are you a hockey fan or a basketball fan? Or basically, like, are you a Raptor fan or a Leafs fan?" And I think the Leafs were actually a much better team at the time. Like, and that was around the time that like Matt Sundin and
Mm.
they had some pretty good squads. And even my dad was watching hockey to fit in with his coworkers. Kind of the same deal as me, actually, thinking about it. But I was like, no, I'm a basketball fan. Like I'm a Raptor fan. And like that Raptor team was terrible. That was like the
Post
Vince
Vince.
Carter. No, it was Vince's last year.
Oh,
And he was scoring like 15 points a game. He went from like averaging 30 to scoring 15, and he was clearly on the way out. And I was like, yeah, yeah, that's my team. That's my team. And that's really the whole story. I kind of just stuck it out with them. But seminal moment when that whoever that kid was, I want to track him down and say thank you. He's probably 30 as well, so he's probably not a kid anymore.
yeah, well, yeah. But and then with that, like, I know you had an interesting way until in how you got into this industry. I think you're in biotech or going into that kind of field for a while,
Mhm.
and then we're at school, didn't like a co-op, started writing at McMaster. Just talk a little bit about your career journey, kind of switching fields and what made you go into basketball media.
Yeah. So, when I got to school, like I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. Like I think that's like a fairly common experience from the people I've talked to, and I kind of knew what I was supposed to do, which was to sort of come out with some sort of like um, like a STEM kind of degree, and then get a relatively stable job, however that exists nowadays. But I just didn't enjoy it, and I thought, I got into the lab. It was chemical biology, which is technically different than biochemistry.
Mm,
Uh,
yeah.
it studies a lot more the chemistry side of things. But regardless, like I was just in the lab for a lot of that year, and I was just like, yo, I hated being in this lab. Like we had this one season long or year long project where we had to like isolate this like compound and then test it and put it through all these like machines to sort of like essentially see if you have isolated the compound, and then B, like what effect that has, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like every week I would come in for 3 hours and like try my very best and be super careful. And then there was like a one small little like accident that I made in terms of like just like my hand shook or something,
Okay.
and it just screwed up the project for the whole year. And I was like, yo, this is a horrible environment. I just remember always like taking off my lab coat and just being sweating. And I was just like, this is terrible. I don't really want to do this.
Yeah.
So it definitely sent me into a spiral in terms of like, okay, what do I do then actually? Because otherwise I'm just spending all this money in school and not coming out with anything. And my response was just like, okay, can I actually try to actively engage myself into thinking about what do I actually want, and try to embrace what I actually want. That's kind of a lifelong struggle, really. But for me,
Mhm.
it was like I really like basketball, and I really liked basketball media. I was always a like longtime reader of Raptors Republic, and so I just really wanted to sort of set that as a target. How can I get to right there? And I try to use the resources that were available to me. So I covered, for example, My first ever beat was covering the McMaster women's basketball team,
Okay.
which was awesome. And shout out to Coach Teresa Burns, who still coaches the team. I actually ran into her, such a weird full circle moment, but I ran into her like last week. I
Okay.
was watching U of T versus McMaster. Both the men's and the women's team played each other, and
Hmm.
the women's team from Mac beat them by like it was like 80-40. I'm not even kidding.
Wow.
And after the game, like because it's not that big of a deal. People were just milling around, and I went up to Coach Burns and I was like, Coach, I don't think you remember me at all. And she didn't, but I was like, I covered your team like 10 years ago, and we talked about that team. And there was one player who was like 6'4", and she had like a 20, she was like Kevin Love in that in that season. She was like 30-30 every game. And I was like, and then she asked me about what I was doing, and I told her, and she's like, she's just very happy for me that basketball is taking me to this point. But yeah, that was the sort of the entry point I wanted. It was just like something I could feel happy about, and I wasn't getting paid for it. And it wasn't even anything that was like great exposure. I mean, it ended up in a school newspaper, which was cool. But like, how many people read a school newspaper? Like maybe like 5,000 at most,
Yeah.
right? And that's probably being very generous. Um, but if I really liked it, and so I try to take little steps towards it. And I didn't necessarily think it'll manifest into this like thing that I'm doing now, but I did think it started with just embracing like what I actually want to do versus like what I should be doing.
And how did you go from McMaster to Yahoo and like you had I still saw a video of you asking Tim Lywicki a question back in the day. I don't know what timeline that was at, but and then the mic,
Uh-huh.
yeah. But just
Okay.
you don't have to detail that, but
No,
uh,
no, no. I'll give you the background. So, first off, shouts to Raptors moment on YouTube. I don't know his identity and I don't know who he is, but we do DM each other quite frequently, and I love his content and I love his work, and I want him this podcast as well. Uh, but yes, I think he actually found that video mostly because Alex found that video because I showed him that video, and it's become a whole thing, which is really funny. But I remember. So what happened there was so I was writing for Raptors Republic at that time, and I got into Raptors Republic because of Blake Murphy.
mm,
I was just kind of blogging on my own, starting my own websites and whatever, and they weren't really getting that much traction. But Raptors Republic had two things. So number one, they had something called the Morning Coffee, which is still a thing that's running right now, where they kind of like go around all the internet and they put all the Raptors content in one place. And because Raptors Republic is such a big like prominent blog, like it actually was a really good place for independent writers to like you would hope to be aggregated in that kind of way.
hmm
So I would reach out to Sam Halako, who was, I think he's still doing morning coffees. And I was sort of begging him, like, hey, can you put my personal stuff on the Raptors, like on your site? And he was like, no problem. And then having done that a couple times, I was like, can I try to just write for Raptors Republic? So during the summertime where it was like, I just wanted to cover like JV in Eurobasket in 2013.
mm,
And
yeah,
so I was just like, I'm gonna watch all the Lithuania games on some sort of illegal stream, and I'm just gonna write all the little takeaways of how JV looked. Because JV was like back in the day, JV was like not Scottie level in terms of hype, but it was like the fifth overall pick, you
yeah,
know? And so I pitched that to Blake, and he was the managing editor at the time. And I was like, can I do this? He's like, of course you can do this. I'm not gonna pay you, but I'm like, yeah, I know, it's okay. I just want to do it. And so yeah, I started getting to write at Raptors Republic, and essentially it was like like any sort of like newsroom in a way. This was a virtual newsroom, but it would be like there's assignments, so who wants to cover this game, who wants to cover this game, and I would always sort of put my hand up for those kind of things. And one of the opportunities that came up was Raptors Public had season tickets, just one pair, and as part of a season ticket event, you
ah,
know you were able to go have a meet and greet with Masai and Tim Lywicki. And this is when Tim got to the Raptors, and that's when he unveiled Masai as well. And so, it was a whole big thing. And one of the perks of it, in addition to like the 2 free cups of wine that they gave you, was you get to sit in the stands and hear this sort of like speech and this vision, almost like a it's like one of those like corporate calls, like the
yeah,
stock brokers. Like, yeah, you
yeah,
get to like call in and ask about the future of Rogers or whatever. So I sat in and I was like, hey, what is the what do you guys want to do in terms of the future of the team? And I don't know. The question was something so silly. I think it was like Tim had come from managing the
yeah.
Lakers. And so I was like, oh, are you guys going to try to build like the Lakers did with like 3 7-footers? Which oddly enough, Raptors kind of a little similar to it right now.
Yeah.
But I mean, whatever. The mic malfunction, all that kind of stuff. It was actually quite hilarious. I also wore like a business outfit, which I thought
Yeah.
was what you needed to do for that. So the whole scene is just quite funny, especially looking back on it 10 years later now. But that's the story of that. And then how I got eventually to Yahoo. I mean, there's a long bridge period there where I worked at the score and I worked
Mhm.
in news aggregation. I
Oh.
wrote NBA news. So the store, like the job essentially was like uh okay, there's two parts of that job. There's one part where it's like Woj tweets something like breaking Tobias Harris has just been traded for Ersan Ilyasova.
Ooh.
Okay, it's like, okay, now I gotta take that right into a little story as quickly as possible, like literally within like 2 to 3 minutes, and then send it to my editor, and then we fire off an alert, and that's how the score app typically works. I think it still does work like that now.
Mhm.
The other aspect was without the breaking news, what we would do is I would go through this like really long list of like every single team and the newspaper associated. So like if I were just sitting at my desk for the 8 hour shift, I would look for like the Philadelphia Inquirer, and then I would look in like whoever wrote whatever, read the columns and see anything like interesting about that, and would aggregate that interesting little bit, write that into a story. That wasn't so time pressing, but like essentially I would pump out like 10, 12 articles a day,
Wow.
and that was the job. And I got that job mostly because I knew Blake. Blake was he went from Public to working at the score, and so he was able to help intro. So that kind of got me in the door. So there was a brief period where I was like working like 3 jobs at the same time, because I was like
Wow.
at school, writing in the newspaper, managing the online section, but also coming to Toronto on weekends to write at the score. And then just also being in school at the same time. So it was kind of a mess, but I did that for a long time. And I think the issue with that was just like I kind of got really bored, as you would. Like I don't think it's like very
No.
inducive to creativity at all, nor was it high paying. Like I'm not even kidding. At the time, I was making like 35K, like for the year. And I mean, I'm not even trying to put aside the money. I think it was just it was not, it's a job where you can like ascend too much, right? Like your
Mhm.
your path was like you can become the supervisor of the aggregators, which was not super enticing for me personally, because I didn't really want to manage. I wanted to sort of create content. And so I kind of did a lot of stuff on the side on my own. I kind of went back to my own sort of like I'll write on my own blog, or I'll podcast. Essentially they put in a writing policy where you couldn't write sports for other publications other than the score, but then the score also didn't want to publish anything that you wrote creatively. So I was like, okay,
Yeah.
this is tough. So I started writing 10 things and just like posting them as a Google on my Google Drive, and then just like posting that screenshot online, because that wasn't part of a writing policy. That's technically a social media post. So it's like a workaround, like a little cheat, whatever. But I wanted to get my work out there. And then also I just like started going to podcasting, because it was like, it's not writing.
Yeah.
Podcasting is not writing. And so I just like invested really, really heavily into podcasting. And thankfully Raptors Public were actually really early on podcasting. And opportunities came about, but kind of started doing that stuff on my own. And eventually that audience got big enough where 2019 came around. Yahoo was like expanding their team, and they really wanted to buy into Raptors coverage, which came at the perfect time. They literally want to win the championship that year. And so March of that year I got hired to start at Yahoo. And that was the first time I got officially like credentialed on a consistent basis and got to cover the games. And yeah, the rest has been great, but kind of a long journey to get to that point.
Was it Alex Wong who reached out to you? Like, how was that? How you kind of?
No,
No.
no. Do not give him the assist for this. Do not give Alex the assist to this. No, who reached out to me was Dan Tillman, who is currently the program director at the Sportsnet on the radio side here as well. So I've worked with Tillman for a couple of years. I actually knew him from the score. This is a thing that I think a lot of people that I've met in the industry have gone through, is like somehow everybody has at one point or another worked at the score or intern at the score. Like it's nuts. Like it's the X score family is gigantic. But basically he left the score to head up the Yahoo team. And we weren't even that close at the score or anything like that. But yeah, he reached out to me, and sort of that was the connection. And I want to make it very clear. So Alex was also working with me at the score. So the score eventually started a features team, I think around 2018. And so they put me on the features team, which I was really happy with. I actually really, really enjoyed that
Mhm.
job. It allowed me to write more NBA stories, be more creative, even get credentialed on a game-to-game basis, which was really fun. And they hired Alex as to be part of that features team because he is a pretty good features writer. And then when he heard that I was going to Yahoo, he then left the score and then somehow got to Yahoo before I got there because he was technically working them as a freelancer, so he can just
Uh,
get started whenever. I had to get on board and all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
So I want to make it clear, he jumped before I jumped, or he jumped after I jumped. He just got there somehow before I did.
That is a crazy story. And just describe your relationship with Alex, and obviously you guys were podcasting at Yahoo, and then obviously now have the Raptor show. Just talk about your relationship and what it's been like to just work alongside each other.
Yeah. So for me, I when I was coming up and I was just like I follow a whole bunch of writers and especially people that I really liked reading a lot and I knew Alex first online. He was a writer at large in New York at the time, and he had written for publications such as GQ and the New Yorker, etc., and New York Times. I feel like I'm reading his bio. I think that's actually where I'm getting this line from. But I really liked the stories he was writing on because it wasn't like the typical NBA stories. It wasn't even like breakdowns or anything like that. You could tell he doesn't love ball that much. Uh, it was sort of just like he liked the culture aspect of it, and so he wrote about like the fashion. He had this whole like GQ piece about hanging out with Chandler Parsons, who was launching his own underwear line, and that was like all the he like ended up drinking like vodkas with Chandler Parsons at the club while he talked to him about Rolexes and stuff like that. Like I was like, okay, that's actually really interesting to me. I really had a great time with
Yeah.
that, and so I started following him first, but he was also someone who like always looked out for younger writers and he especially younger Asian writers too. So he was like he followed me back and was tracking my stuff and promoting me. And then life events took place in his life and it brought him back to Toronto where he's from. And so I remember being invited to his homecoming
Hmm,
party.
cool.
Uh and so I think that might have been one of the first times I met Alex in person. This is back in like probably 2014, 2015-ish. And then yeah, we just stayed in collaboration from that point onwards. Again, like I didn't really have my own platform, so it wasn't or not I didn't have my own platform, but it wasn't like we just like worked hand in hand or anything like that. That didn't really happen until we got to the score and eventually to Yahoo. But just always a really great friend, really good mentor. And yeah, I think once we really started to like work a lot together at Yahoo, we realized that okay, there's like a chemistry thing here. Um, and I think that it was good because I was always so basketball focused and he was so focused on not talking about basketball that it actually created like a nice balance that I think could appeal to a
Yeah.
variety of listeners.
Yeah, I love those words. Like, yeah. I want to ask just about that because you alluded to, being Asian and the NBA media landscape. And I think you said like the ratio is like 10 to 1 white people to people of color. How tough was it to break in the media industry as a person of color and being Asian and just talk about that and now you kind of embrace it and you guys always say ni hao on the Raptors show and talk about
Nice.
Asian culture. I had to drop it in.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
Um, I honestly at first I wasn't like so cognizant of it. I think one of the things when you're writing, you end up sort of being um like when you're writing, you're like this invisible character who's like observing JV at Eurobasket in 2015 or 2013. Like it doesn't necessarily stand out or it doesn't really identify sort of who you are. Even when I got started to do podcasts and stuff like that, like some people would like it was weird. I would go to the arena and some people would be like, I know your voice, your Will. And I'm like, oh, okay. He's like, but I didn't know you were Asian. And so
Huh.
there was that aspect as well. I think nowadays, obviously, like everything is like podcast, everything is like video oriented anyway. So like this wouldn't be so much of a secret if I came up like now instead of 10 years ago. But um yeah, I think the more and more I started like becoming aware of it, I think it was just like my experience was just like, okay, I didn't realize first off the industry was like predominantly white and like really male. Like when I was at the score, for example, like let's say the workroom was like 50 probably like 50 writers. Yeah, like 50 writers. Like it would probably we had like 3 or 4 women in there
Oh.
ever. And then like I would say like 90% of them were men as well, were white men as well. So I mean like I just didn't realize that until I really got into it. And I didn't think too much of it either until I really got to a point where I was like, okay, who is sort of like being promoted, who are sort of like friends with each other, and sort of like how do those actually translate into opportunities going forward? And it just kind of always felt like, okay, there is a bit of a boys club here.
Mm.
um and so I mean, at, for me at least, I was thinking about it in terms of just like when I get this opportunity to sort of do my thing. Number one, I want to continue to work with people that I came up partnering with. So Alex, for example, was one of those people. Blake was one of those people. Even doing Cider Pods and stuff like that, like Assad is one of those people. Saul is one of those
Mhm.
people. And so like that, I sort of like naturally brought my community with me as sort of I did more of my own shows. Vivek, of course, as well.
Yeah.
Um, you know, but like yeah, I think I reached the point where it was like you need to be a little bit intentional about this because like, when you're in a obviously when you're in a public setting, there is obviously an audience and you should say people's names and you should try to offer opportunities to people that, may be essentially be overlooked or other people aren't vouching for. But even in maybe even more important is like whose name are you saying like when it's not on camera, when it's not like in a public setting,
Mm.
and sort of what opportunities are you trying to offer there. And I think the end goal is just like everyone wants to get the best content, everyone wants to get the best um coverage out there, and I think it's just like trying to make up a little bit in terms of some of the blind spots that like just
Yeah.
naturally exist in society. So it's nothing against like um
Yeah.
I was gonna say it's nothing against white people, but I don't think you guys really need to hear that. Like I think
No.
you know that.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I take no offense. But yeah, no, I guess just to follow up on that, and you're talking about your show and who you bring on, just why do you think it took so long for a nationally syndicated, Raptors only show to hit Sportsnet, and 2 years ago, and like why do you think your show's so good and that so many people enjoy it as well?
First off, thank you. I think the answer I gave, I think in the banter pod recently was kind of like what I really believe in. It's just like I think people really needed to see, and by people I mean like the handful of executives at the very, very top of these companies, who have their own blind spots, just
Yeah.
needed to see that like basketball could be successful. Like I think it's one of those things, and this is not even wow, I can't believe I'm talking about prehistoric and it's not a cheap plug. But I was reading Alex's book, and
Yeah.
it's something where even at that time, and that was 1993, 1994, they were trying to like bid and try to like conceive of the idea of bringing basketball, NBA basketball to Toronto. The concerns at that time and the pushback at that time, as I'm learning, because I wasn't there for it, was that like they don't think that this sport can exist here. They don't think that it could thrive here. It's a hockey town. And moreover, it was like they don't think that the people with money, which would be white people, would actually be willing to buy into this product.
Yeah.
And that line of thinking, I think, probably still exists in part to this day, which I think,
Really?
um, yeah, and I don't think it's like as prevalent as it was back then. I mean, maybe we've just kind of like learned how to progress in society in a way, but also at the same time, like, this is still like, what I mean, like deep pockets is still deep pockets, right? Like these people actually don't really change over time, in terms of who these people are, and you kind of
Mhm.
need to see these opportunities take place. And this is not something that like I've personally experienced in terms of I'm in these rooms when these people decide whatever, but um, I think you kind of are in it for long enough that you do see that that's probably the case. And I think the Raptors, one even from their inception, they were like, what we want to do is target immigrants. We want to market towards women. We want to market the game in that way. And I think that that's actually really created in part of the Raptors community that exists today. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the main decision makers at the very top, I don't think it's actually really changed. So when without that, what you really do need is a strong business case, right?
Mm.
If I invest my money into this, I'm gonna make more money out of this. That's pretty much all that sports business really is, besides the passion aspect. And there is obviously an inherent belief that something like hockey would work. There's an inherent belief that baseball will work, because that's probably what they played, and that's probably what the communities that they're run in always have participated in those kind of sports. there's no doubt that like, okay, we can invest in curling. Like, like I don't know, curling as an idea sounds more ridiculous to me, but regardless,
Yeah.
I think for basketball, they needed to see it succeed at the highest levels. And once the Raptors do succeed, once they do sell out, once they do increase their valuation, five, six, tenfold, then they will realize that they can sort of commit more resources to it. And I think that, yeah, like I wouldn't be surprised with that somehow filtered towards the media aspect as well. And that's not to take away anything from people who have covered it for a really long time. Like, I mean, I know it's really popular now to like dunk on these people because they're old, which is just weird to me. Why were we dunking on old people? But like
Yeah.
guys like Doug Smith, guys like Michael Grange, who have covered this team for a really long time, like they have done their very best to try to promote basketball in Canada. Guys like Paul Jones, who has been here since day
Hmm.
one, and Jack and Leo's actually been here since day one, legit since day one. Jack came on a little bit later. Swirsky,
Yeah.
Devlin, like these people have tried their very best to sort of put on basketball to the masses, but like until you actually have that kind of investment from the top, and you probably won't see these type of shows, and so I'm just happy that I came in at the right time more than anything else. I don't think it changed anything. Then that's also why I always say I'm very grateful to Masai because like without him making the Raptors really successful, these opportunities don't even exist for any of us.
Yeah, no, for sure. And just on that, I think I know you've talked about how, you're a fan and also a journalist at the same time. And I think for the show and for why people love you and Alex so much is that you're not just, by the book journalists, you are fans. And like when you interview Dennis Schroeder, I think you say we need to do this or stuff like that, right? Which I love. Just talk
Yeah.
about how you've created content and maybe your approach to creating content.
I think this is a byproduct of not having formal training. I mean it. Like I didn't go to any journalism schools. I didn't take any courses in this. And so every it got to maybe like 2 years ago, finally it reached the point I'm like, okay, I'm a little bit more comfortable. But like this whole time I kind of felt like I was flying by the seat of my pants. I don't think
Mm,
I've ever promised anything other than like I'm just a fan of this game. Like I didn't promise that I'm a journalist. I didn't promise that an analyst who knows ball. Like, I didn't promise I don't have any playing background. I don't have any coaching background. Like I'm coming at this from like the most humblest position possible, which is like I'm a fan. And I think because I consume so much like Raptors content, even going back like 20 years now, um, I kind of just used my guiding principle as like, what would a Raptors fan want to hear? What would a Raptor
mm.
fan want to talk about? What would a Raptor fan want to ask a player when they get an opportunity, ask a coach when they get an opportunity? And like over time, like of course you develop things like, okay, I've been in enough scrums to know how reporters talk and how people talk. And I feel like in a way I'm mimicking until I eventually like learn how to become one as well.
Mm.
I can probably say the same thing about like looking at analysts and seeing like what they've done and try to incorporate some of their ideas and try to apply them myself. Um, but I think the guiding principle is still the same thing, and that's why you hear like the show is kind of still um at its core me. Like I think what maybe the changes in the show are more probably just me maturing as a person because
Mm.
who I was as like a 22-year-old podcaster is very different from who I am now at 30, thankfully, because like, some of it was probably wild and probably inappropriate, but I think for me, I was just like, that's well, anybody can, I think most people are like that when they're 22, they're probably
Yeah.
a lot less mature than they are at 30. So, there's that personal maturation, but I mean, my perspective on it's still the same. And, eventually I had to reach a peace with that. I was like, okay, you know what? Like, if Sportsnet is telling you we are going to give you the show and we want you to still do the same thing, then you have to trust in your instincts that are right. And that's where I was like, okay, you know what? I will just ask Dennis Schroeder like whatever comes to the top of my mind that
Yeah.
day as a fan, like and I want to find out more details. And I'm sure like even the weird thing now that I feel imposter syndrome about is just like agents and like executives will sometimes talk to me and I'm like, what am I supposed to do here? Like, am I supposed to pass this information along? Like,
Yeah.
am I being used? Like, maybe that's where I'm like, damn, I wish I did go to journalism school because
For
like
the
this is not
ethics.
so intuitive as like asking Dennis Schroeder who has more ice on after games, you or Otto Porter. And to
Yeah.
be clear, he did say Otto Porter.
Yeah.
Um, but like, yeah, like that's something I'm still needing to learn and trying to understand and try to like manage how that kind of comes across in the content itself. But it's all a learning process. And again, like I still come at it from the humblest position possible. Like I'm
Mhm.
just a fan of the Raptors, and I know I've been given like so many opportunities, and it's a blessing to get this kind of access. But what I'm trying to do with the access is still trying to service fans like myself. So
Did James Harden consult you on his trade? Is that something that you were a part of, Will?
I was not anywhere near that James Harden trade. I think I do not want to overstate the level of access I have. The best access I have is probably just like, yeah, just like texting an agent or whatever. And honestly, most times I feel so thirsty sometimes when I'm like, hey, what's happening here? But like I feel also part of like that's partly my job now.
Yeah,
So I feel like, you know what, I have to bother you for this because it's my job. But also part of it, I'm like, I'm bothering you because like I'm just curious as a Raptor fan. You know,
yeah.
I'll be like, yo, Pascal, like, what's up with Pascal's free throw form? And he'd be like, yeah, it's a problem. I'm like, okay, okay, cool, 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 cool. It's, so that's the level of access I have, but it doesn't go anything deeper than that, at least in the moment right now.
Is it like you're like trying to like nudge agents or management? Hey, I really like if you did this trade or signed this player.
No, I've trust me, I've never done that. I've never done that. I've never said like, hey, you should push this guy out or you should go get this guy. Like I know myself enough to be like, I know very little about basketball as compared to these people. And so I'm gonna let them cook and then I'll, you know, judge or react to those things as much as possible. But no, I've literally never kind of done anything like that. Mostly because it's like kind of silly, like
Do do
so
do you still get like starstruck as a fan, like around
yeah.
players? And can you give me like an example of when you've felt that before?
Um yeah, I mean, I think there's this feeling that I still get where you're in the scrum and the media scrum and all the other reporters, they're so rehearsed, they kind of even know like a natural pattern. So like Doug will ask this question first
Yep.
and then Grange will probably be like and then come up with a question. So shouts to Grange, that's my guy.
Yeah.
But you,
Yeah.
you do come up with it on the spot, Grange, we all see it. Josh will come up with a question or whatever. And I typically try to ask a question towards the end of the scrum. Sometimes I like to hear what the players are saying and maybe try to ask a follow-up instead of trying to prompt them in different directions. Um, but when the question pops into my head and I'm sort of waiting for that chance to jump in, because it's like just a scrum,
Yeah.
like literally everyone could just say whatever, right? That moment, and I don't know if this happened to you when you were covering the World Cup or even now when you're covering the Sens, is like I know I want to say something, and then you start to think about like, okay, how am I going to phrase this so that my question comes across both like articulately, but also something that you can understand. And I always start to feel a little bit nervous, and sometimes I feel my heart beat really fast, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like I've asked like hundreds of questions. When I talk one on one with players, I don't actually get any nerves at all.
Okay.
So but I think in those moments, when I'm waiting to jump in, it takes me back to like when I first started doing this and I just get really nervous. And I think in terms of being starstruck with the players and stuff like that, not really. Like there's no Raptor player that I'm. There's certainly no Raptor player that gets starstruck by. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's Scottie Barnes walking past, cool. That's Pascal walking past, cool. Like that doesn't really change anything for me. The only person I kind of get a little starstruck by is Masai, only
Okay.
because you have to understand, like when you see Masai in person, he has this crazy aura, man. Like Bobby, I'm like Bobby, whatever. Like I'll just walk up to Bobby and say what up, and we'll talk about restaurants or whatever. But like Masai, I'm just like, oh man, I get a little nervous. I don't know why, man. I honestly, the only thing I would say is he comes in with like a boss like energy,
Yeah.
and this is not me trying to like gas him up or anything because I know people are not super happy with management right now. This is just like actual my experience is like you walk in and he's got an aura, man.
I could only imagine him walking up behind and putting a big hand on your shoulder, and you're like scared. And who is
Yeah,
this? And
that's
then
never
he's
happened, by the way. That's never
okay.
happened.
Okay, okay. Well,
Uh,
yeah, okay. Before I go, we'll go to the Raptors quickly, but I
yeah,
just
sure.
have two quick kind of fun questions. The first one is, as a player, I know you hoop a little bit. What
Yeah,
what
yeah,
what is your NBA comparable?
yeah. I've thought about this a lot because people ask me this quite regularly because I insist on talking about pickup basketball. My comp is Georges Niang.
Oh my God. Wow. I can
Yeah,
see
yeah, the minivan. Yeah, I I I identify with Georges Niang. I feel like he doesn't really have like again, no offense, but like, just relative to other NBA players who are like the fittest people in the world, like Georges Niang really does stand out as a regular person.
Yep.
Um, and then all he does is chuck threes and kind of like maybe play a little bit of defense, but mostly try to stay out the way and try to space the floor. That's exactly my game. So shouts to Georges Niang. Um, yeah.
Have you ever met him?
Have I met Georges Niang? What a question. I probably have, but I mean, like, it's not the most memorable thing. It's not exactly like Masai walking past and the aura hitting you.
Yeah, yeah.
Georges Niang, no aura confirmed.
So if tomorrow Adam Silver resigns because William Liu needs to become the next commissioner of the NBA, what is your first decree as commissioner?
First decree as commissioner will be to command the LA Clippers to surrender all their picks moving forward until 2040 for tampering with Kawhi. Uh, no, I mean honestly, what I would really like to see in terms of like as a change in the game is like this is such a crazy idea, but I said on the show recently, it was like, can we make dunks worth 3 points? Because
Yeah,
I do feel like it's like you're not incentivized enough to go to the basket, right? Because like the 3 point line, obviously just math wise, like three is so much more than two. And so that's why you see games now with like 50 plus threes. And I'm like, I don't mind if like the Warriors take 50 threes. Like that's great. I love seeing Steph chuck threes. I love seeing like Clay shoot threes, like whatever, right? But like, man, like some of these teams hitting 53s, I'm like, you're just trying to like play the most efficient way regardless of your skill set, because of the fact that this is sort of what the math is dictating. And I don't want that to be the case. I don't want basketball to fall in the same way as baseball, where it's like if you play the most optimal strategy, talent is worth less. Like I want talent to win, not strategy to win. I want strategy to help talent win, which is great, but I think it's like almost veering a little bit too far in that direction. And so yeah, you make dunks worth 3 points. I think it'll make centers more relevant again. Like I do
Mhm.
like seeing guys roll to the basket, and who doesn't like people dunking? Like you would incentivize people to actually finish more
I,
plays via dunk. So
I know you love pickup basketball. I just think about when you play and there's no fouls, and then the guy just grabs you while you're gonna shoot the game-winning shot. And I just
mhm.
think about dunks, and if they're 3 points, if guys are just hard fouling all the time. I don't know. Maybe that's just
I
me, but
well, I don't mind. I don't mind. That's also something I love to do is
we need
commit
we
some
need we need Serge
unnecessarily hard
Ibaka
fouls.
back in the league, just going over and starting beef with everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we need. Okay, I'll go to the Raptors quickly, and again, I really appreciate you taking the time and doing this. But the vibes are back. It seems as though even though they're 4-4,
Mhm.
500 like they were last year, everything feels different. Obviously, Barnes has been amazing. OG's been a defensive player of the year candidate, but how optimistic are you about this team's maybe potential, and what do you think their ceiling is with the roster that they have right now?
Yeah, I think the temperature check of the fan base is like people are like they don't want to jump in the water fully because they don't want to look silly because that's what we all did last year. And then we look like idiots just like fighting each other in the pool, being like this sucks. Um so I understand the apprehension for sure. And like when you look down at the team, it's like, yeah, like they do have some pretty glaring missing parts. But what's been really encouraging to me, um, I think my goals for the season were like number one, make it a happy workplace for people to come to. Um, and it is. Like it is really, really like at least noticeably different from last year. I think last
Really?
year they just kind of like were more down. And honestly, even just the reports of the mood around the team, like just wasn't great.
Hmm.
I'm not going to get into the specifics of it because I don't think it's like completely fair without verifying all the facts. But when you hear from like 7 or 8 different people around the team, it's like, okay, yeah, I think I kind of understand that I'm touching an elephant in the room. You know what I mean? Like that's you get the idea. But um yeah, it does seem like a much more positive workplace to come into, which has been great. I think number two was like, can Scottie Barnes make this jump? And I think he is actively making this jump. This is the reason why everyone is so high on Scottie after year one. This is why people were a little, disappointed last year because it didn't happen to this degree. And now we feel really elated because he's making this jump. And like, this is great. Like I know there's like a big jump to be like, oh, you were right, you were wrong, whatever. But it's like ultimately Scottie jumping at this level is what's going to carry this franchise forward. And in terms of upside, that was the upside. Scottie is the upside. So seeing some of the performances he had recently, which fully reaffirms that. And I think more, even the most reaffirming isn't even necessarily the game that he had in San Antonio, where he like completely took over 17 points in the fourth quarter, making every single play possible on both ends. Um, it's the consistency of it, right? Like
Yeah.
I do the reaction podcast and I hand out the 3 stars after every game, pretty standard thing. And like Scottie got like 7 straight first stars. Like I don't think I've ever even I don't remember ever doing that. So it's the consistency of that performance that he's had over this time, which has been awesome to see. So that changes the ceiling of it. And obviously, guys got to get healthy. But I do appreciate the changes that Darko's brought in.
Hmm.
I'm not going to say that like everything Darko is doing is to reverse what Nick was doing, but it does feel like he is like taking the opposite, which happens all the time in sports managing. Um, in soccer, for example, it would be like, okay, we're giving up too many goals. Let's bring in a conservative manager, and now we
Yeah.
win a lot of 1-0 games, but the game's boring. Let's bring in a different manager to make it exciting, and then so it just goes in these cycles, right? So I don't think Nick was right. I don't think Nick was wrong. I don't think Darko was necessarily right just because Nick was necessarily wrong, but he did change things, and it is refreshing to watch the same team play in an entirely different way because of the fact that now opens possibilities for you because maybe you can get a different result out of this team. And of course, there's other things like you need Pascal to find his level consistently, and I still believe in that. Like I don't really see why 7 games to start the year would negate like 5 or 6 years of his career at this point.
Hmm.
You need to see Gary kind of come up to the level. I believe in that as well. We've seen really good stuff from Gary in the last 3-4 years. And I believe that he'll find that level. And I think once that happens, alongside of Scottie making this jump and OG playing great defense, as you mentioned, like, this is going to be really, really like fun season because we had all expectations stashed. And so even though we're 500 again, like it feels much better than 500 felt last year. Like, and I think that there's real reasons for that. Like Scottie making this jump is huge. The team liking each other is huge. And
So
the team
funny.
playing in a productive way on both offense and defense is also massive. So
Why do you think why do you think Barnes has made that jump this year? And is it just as much you could argue just because he's shooting better or like what do you see in his game that's so different? And maybe what's his ceiling? Is it close to MVP? Is that too high of a ceiling to put? Like I don't know. He's been phenomenal.
if he plays the same way that he's played all season, he's an all-star this year. Like the first
Oh.
8 games, absolutely he's an all-star. There's no doubt. If he plays even at 90% of the level that he's at right now, by the time the all-star voting comes around, he will be an all-star. And then of course, when you look at it, it's like, are there more things that he can add to his game? I think so. Like he's a young player. He's not like the most polished player even right now. But what I like seeing from him right now is that he's clearly added um skill work over the last like 2 years. So I think his jump shot, for example, looks a lot smoother. His free throw form looks a lot smoother as well. Those aspects, even just like the handle is getting a little bit better as well. It's allowing him to get to different shots and different spots on the floor. His defensive instincts, I think, have always been there, but Darko putting him not on the ball, which Nick had him guarding the ball all the time, but having him in the corners a little bit more, even as on the baseline a little bit more, allows him to see all the action coming towards him, and that's why he's had such a incredible start with like all these steals and all these blocks. Like he had back-to-back games with like 3 steals, 3 blocks against San Antonio. Now he had 4 steals, 2 blocks against Dallas. It's like, man, that doesn't happen by accident. Like that's a like really, really great talent. And also B, like really, really good defensive deployment by the coach in this case, right? So um I think for me though, like it's the enthusiasm, it's the energy. Like he is just like relentless right now. And he wants to take the charge, he wants to take over, he wants to create on both ends of the floor. And I think that energy was like, at times was missing last year. And I
Yeah.
think that's more than anything else what anybody was disappointed by was just like, you know, year one, Scottie Barnes comes into the league is exuberant. Like I fell in love with Scottie Barnes game 2 of his career when he
Boston.
had 26 and 12 against Boston. And like, not only did they win the game, but like Boston was booed off the court. Like that's what I want to happen on Saturday when the Raptors play them, right? So like that energy that Scottie played with, it happened all the rookie season, and I felt like that wasn't necessarily there for a lot of last year, and now it's really back. Plus, he's added skills to his game. So Yeah, I mean, in terms of this like future and potential, like I don't know, no one has a crystal ball. I don't think the front office even has a crystal ball, but um we can also just look at what he's doing right now. And what he's doing right now, he's playing an all-star level. And that's all that we have all wanted for. Like the one thing the Raptors fan base, which is quite split right now, but the one thing that people can agree on is we all want to see Scottie Barnes be an all-star, and he is giving us everything.
How do you think that kind of affects how the Raptors go about the futures of Siakam and OG, just with them being unrestricted free agents? Like, how does that him ascending to probably an all-star this year affect the future and how they see the landscape of this team?
Yeah, I mean, it's totally a fair question to ask. Especially because Scottie for sure is going to be here long term. You need to see how everything fits, and can they all play at a high level together? More importantly, not even just can they all play at a high level, but can the Raptors win with them together? If the Raptors win like 40, like 50 games this season, and there's real ascension and get to the playoffs, I think they'll keep everybody. They really do.
Really?
That's Masai's MO. But if they don't win, then he'll make huge changes. And I think that's just sound management on his part. Whether he misses opportunities or not. Like I remember asking Masai this question at media day, where my heart was pounding as Masai and his aura, and me also
Yeah.
having a question in mind came up, and I asked him, I was like, if you don't trade these guys now, like, do you worry about their value being less at the trade deadline? And he sidestepped the question. He Euro stepped it.
Yeah.
Uh, but I do have that same question in mind. Like, okay, so can you still get the same value if you choose to pivot midseason? But yeah, I think if they all win, he's gonna keep them together. That's what he's always done with the team,
Yeah.
except for the Kawhi trade. Like that's really his MO for 10 years. So I believe in the track record.
Yeah. So I guess just on that with Bobby and Masai, like as the fan base is definitely split on how they feel about them, 4 or 5 years out of winning the championship. How would you assess maybe their maybe last couple years, and how much is maybe too much patience leading to inaction and poor action?
Yeah. Let me see. I think it's a little bit difficult because when on the bigger picture you look at it and you're like, okay, you, you they have like a couple of years there where it felt like it was wasted. Like the Tampa year felt completely wasted. That one I don't even hold them accountable for. Like they 2 weeks before the season started, they had to relocate their whole franchise, their whole lives. The players were so miserable down there as well. Like it was in the middle of a global pandemic. It just felt completely unnecessary to do all that. And so whatever, that thing fell apart. Last season I felt like it was a wasted year as well. And I think he's responded to that mostly by changing the coach. And I think that we've seen the necessary changes from that new coach, which is what we really needed to get. Besides that, like I think they were trying to manage it as is. So 2019, 2020, like they were never going to move away some of their veteran pieces just because Kawhi left. That team had way too much momentum, had too much pride. And honestly, like that team was too fun to break up,
That
man.
was
Like
awesome.
that was such an awesome year. Nick winning coach of the year. I think that also got Masai and Bobby their contract extensions as well. For them, and they deserved it. They had done a really, really good job with the group. It got Nick his contract extension as well. I think they actually ripped up his old contract and just gave him a raise like three, four
think
times.
I think that's true. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because all those guys deserved it. Then the next year happens is Tampa. So you throw all that out the window. From the Tampa thing, they do get Scottie. They did make the right decision to tank, and of course, they got a little lucky too. They moved up.
Yeah.
As people remember, we had the seventh best lottery odds, and we moved to four, and we drafted Scottie, which was great. And looking back, Scottie fell to us like at four, which is actually really really great because I don't think people will pick him below Jalen Green or even Evan Mobley. I think is like pretty well whatever. I have a I love I
That's
love
a
I love I
different.
love I love hating on Evan. It's great.
Yeah.
Just yeah. Um, but yeah, like they got Scottie out of that. Now, of course, I think there are other things that they didn't really bat 100 on for sure. Like, they trading away all these first round picks. Like, I would love to have some of the players in the prospect system right now that the Spurs have used them on, for example. Like, even if you just took whoever the Spurs took, like I would love to have Malachi Brown like on
Yeah.
the Raptors bench right now instead of
Yeah.
Thad Young. No offense to Thad, who I really like, a
But
really nice dude. Shouts to his wife as well. Finds everything on Twitter. So if you say anything bad about that, she will find you. She's I'm not even kidding. Shouts to Shakaya. But like I think those are some of the missed opportunities. Obviously, like the mishandling Fred, I think was one of them as well. At least they recovered with that by signing Dennis, which I think has
Who's
been a
been
really, really great addition
for the
to
Raptors show?
the to the Raptors show, but also on court as well.
Yeah. It was
So
that
then
were
yeah,
you talking to Masai and his aura and saying, "Hey, I just, we need to get this done just for the Raptors show." Was that something you did well?
I actually remember. I remember chatting with Bobby. It was like I was in Vegas and they unveiled Dennis in like this Vegas hotel room, whatever that they were practicing in. And the team had just had breakfast with the whole staff around, and then they cleared out, and then they wheeled out like their computer and the mic, whatever, and they did a Zoom press conference for Dennis. And so I was just chilling in the back and just like catching up with Bobby a little bit, and we were talking about like the Dennis signing while Dennis was doing his press conference, and he did say one thing. He was just like, "You guys are gonna love talking to him this year." And I don't think he knew that he was going to be on the Raptors show. I think he just meant like, he's a really engaging speaker. He's got a really really cool story, um, and just overall like a good head on his shoulders. And I think that that's what we've seen both on and off the court from Dennis so far. And yeah, I mean, I don't think they signed him to be to feed the media. I think they signed him because they needed a point guard really badly, but yeah, it's worked out nicely, and I'm happy that Dennis continues to come on the Raptors show. It seems like him and his people really like the conversations that we've had so far, and yeah, I've never had a player call me from the team bus before,
I was
so
gonna, yeah.
that's it's a career highlight for sure. Yeah.
You need to get him with like Masai in the picture as well. Just the two of them just talking to you. I can only imagine. Well, it wasn't didn't Barnes talk to, I think it was Tim, and then Masai came up during, was that, wasn't that on? Anyways,
What
that
happened?
was
I
just
don't,
a
I don't
theory.
even know.
But okay, before I let you go, just one question because I have to ask Canada basketball. I have you
Of
here.
course,
Who would be your starting five in Paris with everyone available?
bro. This is such a hard question, and you know it. Like it
Yeah.
is actually so hard. I wish we had one more big. I really wish we had one more big. I wish that during the tournament as well. Um, so for me, Shea obviously starts. There's no question about that. No doubt about that. Um, what Dylan Brooks did in that tournament, and
He's playing well right now.
you saw it in person, you see it right now. I think his true shooting is still north of 70%, which is absurd. I've never seen a guy go from the 40s to the 70s in true shooting. It's nuts.
I will say, Will, being around him, he made every single three-pointer in practice. And
Okay.
it's like, and I
Okay.
was like, am I seeing this wrong? Like, why is he shooting
Right.
way better than Kelly Olynyk? But he made like, he'd go like 9 of 11 all the time.
Mhm.
Just step back, everything. He just, even though his form's kind of junky, it
It is
works.
kind of his hand just flies off.
Yeah,
Like
it's
it's
like it kind of like
yeah.
forcibly pushes the ball forward. It's so weird.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
But yeah. So I'm based on what he's done, I'm not benching him. It doesn't even matter if he has a bad year this year. He's starting for me in Paris. Like based on what he's done in the World Cup. And obviously you were there for all of those like that. I mean, what a ridiculous performance. Well, not all of them, but you were there for so much of them, and what a great performance. I would I would definitely start Jamal if he commits. I think one of the issues with the team was the lack of like secondary play creation outside of Shea. And we were very lucky to get what we got from Dylan, but I don't necessarily want to bank on him scoring 40 against the States every time.
Nope.
I'd rather have Jamal like be the backup point guard sometimes, but also be the start in the backcourt with Shea.
Oof.
Oh man, RJ, buddy, you've been so loyal. Your dad's the GM. You've been so loyal. Like honestly, I don't think anyone's been more loyal than RJ. I think maybe you shared one of the quotes, which I got a really good kick out of in the summertime. Was just I think Shea joked that
Oh
RJ
yeah.
can't
Yeah.
skip you can't skip the team because his dad's
Yeah,
on it.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
so he has been so loyal. But I mean, if I and Wiggins is not even having a good season, but
He's been bad. Yeah.
I think I would start Wiggins
You like his like
over RJ.
10% defensive rebounding rate or something like that.
He is a really good rebounder, which I think that is going to be pretty important in this kind of case. I think his size is better. And look, listen, like I think RJ kind of had like some really good moments. Even in the USA game, I think he had like 25. Like that's pretty damn good. But
Up and
I don't
down.
know. He's a little up and down for me. And I think the shooting I think is a little more consistent with Wiggins. So I'd probably go with Wiggins. Honestly, if you want us to play small, man, RJ can play a four if you want. Like I guess
Zach
I don't.
Edey?
No, Zach Edey,
I know.
unfortunately, I think we talked about it, but like it was tough watching him some of those tournament games.
Yeah.
When he played like 10 seconds against Spain, and then like
It
there
was
was like,
10-0 run.
yo, that was crazy.
It happened in the USA game too,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
the funniest thing was in that Serbia game. I don't remember. Jordy subbed in Zach in the third quarter
Yeah.
for like 10 seconds. And as soon as that happened, the opposing coach was like, all right, I'm gonna put in my spacing five. And then like Jordy kind of was like, oh no, just kidding. I want to take him back, but they couldn't take him back. And so he had to be on the floor for like 15 seconds. And man, it was salute to
Uh,
my Chinese king, Zach Edey, but you're not ready yet. Sorry, unfortunately.
yeah.
I probably, yeah, starting wise, I probably start with Dwight Powell. I mean, I just want a little bit of size to go with that group. And like that's not bad, I guess. Like I think obviously you need more in the front court. You need RJ to really play big. You need Wiggins to help with the rebounding. You need Dwight to really play great defense. I think that allow you to switch a lot because pretty much everybody in that group is 6'6". Like Jamal will be the shortest guy at like 6'4".
But he's
And then
yeah.
yeah, and then the tallest guy will be like 6'7" in Powell. So like you could switch a lot. And I thought Canada did look their very best when they switched a whole bunch. Um, and this excludes some pretty great options, like, but
Yeah,
that's not
and
a bad
we'll
squad.
and they'll beat LeBron on his send off in Paris with Steph Curry
Oh,
and all of them. That
all the
I
old guys?
Yeah, I just want Dylan Brooks going at LeBron, putting 40 on him, and
Mhm.
Canada winning the gold medal. That'd be pretty sweet. So
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
that would be the dream.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you giving me so much time, Will. I know you're a busy guy, so anything you just want to plug for the Raptor show, you can even do Alex and Prehistoric, anything you
No, he's
want.
good, man. You got enough love for that book. What do I want to plug, man? Yeah, just listen to the Raptor show. I think that yeah, I mean we've talked so much about my career in this case, and I always appreciate a chance to sort of share that with people because I think I don't know, the most common question I get is like, how did you get in this position and how can I sort of like do something similar? Because there's obviously such an overwhelming interest in working in sports media. So I appreciate the platform you've given me here to talk about that. And yeah, that's really all I wanted to say.
Well, thank you so much. And whenever you teach a basketball writing course, I need to sign up. I hope it's virtual or something from
It
here in
was
Ottawa.
virtual. It was
Yeah, okay,
virtual.
perfect. I'm gonna
Yeah,
sign
yeah.
up. I need that for sure. So I really appreciate the time, Will, and everyone has to check out the Raptor Show. Amazing content, and especially when you guys aren't talking about basketball. So I appreciate the time, and best of luck for the rest of the season.
Yeah, likewise to you, man.